You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Well, we've survived another week in the untied states of America. But we have two guests today who will really lift your spirits in this little corner of where we try to conjure some sanity. We're going to learn about a whole movement developing of scientists who are determined to run for office because they're tired of science and reason being trumped over by people who are in office. And we're also going to learn about a passion for plumbing by a great woman plumber. But first, we need to go inside the headlines. Today, I'd like to start with something important for scale. Last Monday, astronomers announced they had seen and heard a pair of dead, dense neutron stars collide at nearly the speed of light, giving us Earthlings our first glimpse of the process by which most of the metals and minerals in the universe were created. The collision, called a kilonova, vibrated through the galaxy in which it happened 130 million light years from here in the southern constellation of Hydra, sending fireworks across our known universe and ripples in the cosmic fabric that set off sensors way back here on Earth. That's scale for you. Perspective always helps. Back here in the United States, an event almost as cataclysmic took place, a bipartisan agreement drafted by Democratic Senator Patty Murray and Republican Senator Lamar Alexander that would fund a key insurance subsidy program and provide states with more flexibility around parts of the healthcare law, the ACA. Everybody chose the nearest roof and danced on it, except people in the White House, since Trump was against it, then for it, then against it again once somebody explained to him that it helped keep alive health care, which is nicknamed for Obama. Finally, the first of many lawsuits mounted by ethics groups against Trump for violation of the Constitution has made it to court. This case posits that his refusal to give up his properties, in fact his raising rates on his clubs and hotels like Mar-a-Lago and the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C., is in violation of the Constitution's emoluments clause that clearly states no benefits can accrue to the president from foreign powers for fear of corruption and influence. Trump has claimed he's going to donate any monies from foreign governments staying at his hotels, to which they now, of course, flock. He'll donate that to the U.S. Treasury. But since no one believes Trump could find the U.S. Treasury unless he were in the process of pilfering it, that likely won't stand up in court. Besides, he never donates to whatever he promises he will. Might as well get the Trump dump out of the way at once. We have a new bit the dust guy. Tom Marino, Trump's pick for drug czar, was forced to withdraw after the news report that Marino's bill, when he was back in Congress, had helped pump more painkillers into parts of the country already in the midst of the opioid crisis. The bill was opposed by the DEA, and yet Marino went ahead, having co-written it with Big Pharma. Bit the dust. The malevolent elf, Jeff Sessions, returned to the Senate Judiciary Committee, this time for oversight questions, although a few senators did have questions about the last time puckish Jeff had puckily testified and had readily and puckily lied about never having had contact with the Russians, when in fact he had had 3 meetings with the Russian ambassador during Trump's campaign, of which Sessions was a part. This time he smiled puckishly and lied about his having lied the last time he lied about lying. He also got not so puckishly Southern gentleman mortally offended at the outrage to his honor, sir, by any of his former Senate colleagues implying that, well, all the evidence showed he lied. Personally, I confess I have discovered a vein of sadism in my character, watching in pure pleasure as Senator Al Franken reduced Sessions to puckish stammers. Bravo, Al, and Puck Sessions. Then there's the deja vu news. A federal judge in Hawaii blocked the latest version of Trump's travel ban. Internationally, the scariest news comes from Austria, birthplace of Adolf, and with last Sunday's election, home to a new right-wing government in Europe. 31-year-old Foreign Minister Sebastian Kurz, as in Mr. Kurz, he dead, but no, that's Joseph Conrad. This one, Sebastian, is only 31 and very much alive, and his People's Party emerged as the strongest political force in the country, winning 31.4% of the vote. But Kurz will need to form a coalition government because that's only a plurality. And this might be even more frightening because he'd have to form that coalition, and the best candidates for it are even further rightward parties, such as the Nationalist Populist Freedom Party, which is regarded as neo-Nazi and which is a major contender, winning 27% of the vote. Does Austria never learn? Better news comes from India, where the Supreme Court struck down part of the legal code that had permitted men to have sex with their underage wives. 18 is the age for marriage and consent to sex for a woman in India, but another provision of the law inconsistently had permitted a man to have sex with a girl as young as 15, so long as he was married to her. This, of course, encourages child marriage, already prevalent in rural India, which has put millions of girls in dangerous and, in fact, lethal situations. The court's ruling ended this discrepancy. Now, sexual intercourse with a girl below 18 years of age is rape, regardless of whether she's married or not. The Harvey Weinstein sexual harassment and assault news has swept the entire world, and French women posted their own hashtag version of the United States hashtag #MeToo. Marlene Schiappa, France's junior minister for gender equality, said the government there is considering precisely how to define street harassment and how high a fine should be levied for such behavior. Several European countries have moved to criminalize sexual harassment, including Portugal, where the left-leaning government in 2015 made verbal sexual abuse a fine up to Euro 220, or that's about $142 US. Belgium has also moved against it, and in 2014 introduced penalties for sexual harassment, including a jail sentence of up to 1 year for remarks intending to express contempt for a person because of her or his gender. Last, thousands of Israeli and Palestinian women wrapped up yet another 2 weeks long march around the region, demanding that their leaders act to achieve peace. 8,000 people assembled in an area north of the Dead Sea in the West Bank under the auspices of the group Women Wage Peace, which organized the march. Women and children wrote signs reading, "Peace be upon you," in Arabic and Hebrew. They beat drums and they sang, and they were barely covered in any media anywhere in the world. It's time for a short break here at Women's Media Center Live, but we'll be right back where we'll learn more about pi. Not the kind you eat, the kind that's all around us, the most widely known mathematical ratio both inside and outside the scientific community, and it's used in virtually everything that we encounter in our daily lives. And like pi, science is all around us, except in politics. And that's going to change. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Shaughnessy Naughton is the founder of 314 Action. She's an entrepreneur with a degree in chemistry and with a passion for understanding the role of science in our everyday lives. She ran for office as a newbie. She didn't win, but through that campaign, she learned that there simply are not enough people with any scientific background in Congress, and that we see the effects of that in the attempted politicization of science, in mocking of basic research, and in denial of climate change. And that, of course, is not just bad for science, it's bad for the planet. So, to develop a pro-science agenda, we need people who are in politics, and who can lobby those who are. Ergo, the founding of 314action.org. And she's here today to talk about that with us, Shaughnessy Naughton. Well, it's so good to have you here, Shaughnessy Naughton, because this wonderful organization that you founded, 314action.org, is, I think, one of the things that just what we need in today's political climate. Tell about 314 Action, but first tell about the name, because I loved that.
Well, 314 are the first three digits of pi, which is used throughout the sciences. So we thought that would be a good way to, emblematic of what we're trying to do, is really bring science to the forefront of in the political discussion.
And what does 314 Action do?
Well, we are an organization dedicated to recruiting and training scientists to run for public office and supporting them in that endeavor, because we believe that we would have better policy if we had more scientists in elected office.
You know, it seems to me that the ones who are there are mostly former medical doctors, and they take these appalling positions against reproductive choice, against the disbelievers in climate change. I mean, what happened to them on the way to becoming politicians?
Well, I can't speak to them, but I can say that, I think, especially right now during the opioid crisis, we're hearing more and more from elected officials saying that we need to base solutions to the opioid crisis on evidence and, on what actually works. And I find that quite refreshing, and I wish the same approach would be taken to, teaching about health education and women's health, that things are based on evidence rather than an individual's feelings.
Well, we have a president who doesn't let facts get in the way of judgment, God knows. And, you would think, just recently we had these horrific floods from Hurricane Harvey in Texas, where a lot of climate change deniers, I'm afraid, happen to live. Certainly not everybody in Texas, but some do. And you'd think that this would change their minds, but I'm not confident that it will. I think it would probably have more effect if we went down and we said, God is punishing you for voting against women's reproductive freedom and for voting for Trump, and so that's why you're getting rain and floods. But it must despair you as a scientist.
It really, the human impact of climate change is very real, and that, the fact that we have politicians acting so recklessly by denying its existence rather than focusing on what we're going to do to mitigate the effects of climate change is just, it's reckless and it's very short-sighted. Yeah. And events like what happened are reminders that we are not immune to this. This isn't something, climate change isn't something that's happening in a far-off land. Right. It's happening here, and it's going to continue to affect all Americans, and we would be much better served by acting now. The longer we wait to act, the more expensive and more troubling it's going to be.
Yeah, and I guess some people feel it or understand it only when it happens to them. The capacity for empathy is lower than we would like, perhaps, on their front. I don't know. You yourself were a chemist, or are a chemist, and then you had a brief flirtation with being a politician. Tell us about that.
Well, in 2014, I stepped up to run for Congress in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And part of what motivated me to do that was what felt like the attacks on science and the cuts to research funding that are very short-sighted and putting us behind on an international stage. And I was not successful in my bid, but I did learn a lot. And one of the things I observed was there's a real lack of people with scientific backgrounds in Congress. Yeah. And I think we see the results of that in policy priorities. And so that that is why I founded 314 Action, was to take scientists beyond the lab, to have scientists think of themselves more than just an advisory position and actually take a seat at the table, because that's how we are going to change the direction of things.
Right. That was a wonderful idea. Might you ever run again yourself?
Right now I am really excited about the work I'm doing with 314 Action, and that's just not in my plans.
You'd be an awfully effective spokeswoman, and clearly were. But it must have been a culture shock and then some to go from the world of chemistry, where you could, prove and double prove something, and if you couldn't, then that itself told you something was not working. To the kind of the la la land feel of politics, where you must have felt like Alice in political land or running for office.
It is a very different experience, to say the least. Boiling things down into 30-second sound bites is not something that scientific training particularly teaches you. And, and that's something that politicians are very good at, is simplifying things that often shouldn't be simplified. Right. But that's where I think that's where it's important to have people from diverse backgrounds running for office, because whether you're successful or not in the actual election, you do have an influence on the discourse.
Yes.
And that itself is important.
Of course it is, and to raise consciousness. It's interesting because we have a lot of scientists, feminist scientists mostly, on this program, or women who have been turned into feminists because of discrimination in their particular scientific field, or engineering, or STEM in general. And 201, they all are echoing something similar to what you say. They are all some are doing TED Talks, and some have set up programs to go into the high schools and get more young women involved in STEM, and also raise consciousness about the importance of science. And there seems to be a new breath of, to mix my metaphors, outreach, a breath of outreach. There you go, Robin. A desire to reach outside the scientific community and the so-called ivory tower, and alert people that scientific thinking is in severe danger, and that means that sentient life on the planet is in severe danger. Am I just reading into that a trend, or do you sense that yourself?
Oh, I definitely agree that the attacks on science didn't start with the Trump administration,
right.
But it has certainly been a catalyst for getting scientists to step up and get involved.
Yeah.
This year, we've had over 6,000 scientists reach out to us across the country who want to run for public office, whether it's for school board or city council, all the way up to the federal level. And that's something we've never seen before. So I am encouraged that so many people are willing to take that step into public life, and I think it's going to be very beneficial for our country.
Oh, I am encouraged too. I mean, I think it might actually also civilize politics somewhat. And it's I think that somehow progressives in general, feminists, scientists for that matter, thought certain things were settled, like, the earth is not flat. And it was like a warning bell. Wrong! And so the fact that people are coming forward, more women are running for office and plan to run for office next year than ever before in the history of this country. And what you're saying about scientists, and in fact the existence of 314 Action, itself is, these are all people sort of waking up on the side of rationality and ratiocinative thought and saying, okay, oh wow, okay. Because the other folks were running for school boards and changing textbooks, for decades, very quietly, even at that level. So it's time we woke up. I'm very grateful to you and to, 314action.org, where people can go online and find out more about it. Yes? Can they? Yes?
Yes, and we are also on Twitter and Facebook.
Okay, it's 314action, and if you forget the name, just remember pie, not the cherry or blueberry kind, the scientific kind. Thank you, Shaughnessy.
We all can use more pie. Thank you very much, Robin. I appreciate it.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. Well, here's a special one. Trump has nominated a former top Texas environmental regulator, Texas is the operative word, who has argued that carbon dioxide is a harmless gas that should not be regulated. He's nominated her to be the White House Senior Advisor on Environmental Policy. Her name is Kathleen Hartnett White, and she would be leading the Council on Environmental Quality if confirmed by the Senate. Come on, Senate. Currently, she serves as a senior fellow at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, which is a free market think tank. Not doing much thinking. Anyway, just a few days before nominating her, he nominated Andrew Wheeler, a coal lobbyist, to be deputy administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, and Barry Lee Myers, a chief executive of AccuWeather, which is a for-profit weather forecasting company that considers the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to be his enemy because they give weather forecasts for free. Well, he's nominated him to head the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. But back to Kathleen Hartnett White. She is the author of a piece called Fossil Fuels, the Moral Case, in which she argues that labeling carbon dioxide emissions as a pollutant is, quote, absurd, and she asserts that it should be considered, quote, the gas of life. I think in that case she should be made to breathe it. She also has called renewable energy unreliable and parasitic, and described global warming as a creed, a faith, a dogma that has little to do with science. And she believes and has stated that science does not dictate policy in democracies. Well, of course not. Superstition does. So moving right along to NASA, which you hope would be better. Last spring, when they had the Human to Mars Summit in Washington, D.C., women sort of seized the dais at a certain point at the end of the day, and kind of took over, pointing out that in 59 years, NASA has flown more than 50 women into space, which may sound good, but it isn't so great when you consider they've flown hundreds of men over the same time period. And what the women were raising and what have they been pressuring about to this day is that if we ever want to colonize a planet like Mars, poor Mars, we're going to have to bring hundreds of women or thousands, not just a token woman or two, to see how women's bodies are in fact affected differently in the challenges of zero gravity. Ellen Stofan, the former chief scientist at NASA, pointed out that we don't have as big a database of women astronauts, so it's always harder to get statistical data, but we already do see differences, and we're ignoring women astronauts' health at our peril. So it's important not just to have a token woman now and then spend an extended time in space, but to have multiple subjects, because we're just starting to learn how long-duration spaceflight affects the human body, and the male body is not the only human body. People experience bone mass loss and muscle wasting in space, which is why astronauts exercise for about 2 hours a day, which still might not be enough to counteract the effects of microgravity. Astronauts' brains can change shape during spaceflight. They've already found that the amount of gray matter fluctuates during short and long duration missions. The twin study with the Kelly brothers, Mark and Scott, pointed out real differences, and we don't have a twin study for women. But from what we do know, we cannot assume what applies to men applies to women. One study published in the Journal of Women's Health in 2014 notes that women reach a maximum number of safe days in space earlier than men because we have a higher incidence of radiation-induced cancers like lung, thyroid, breast, and ovarian. And at the Humans to Mars conference, researchers reiterated that women's reproductive organs might be more sensitive to the radiation exposure of spaceflight than men's. The little data we have from women astronauts points to other unexpected differences between the sexes. For instance, a mysterious eye condition called visual impairment intracranial pressure syndrome, VIIP, appears more prevalent in male astronauts. And preliminary research suggests that female astronauts might be more susceptible to urinary tract infections while in space and orthostatic intolerance following their return to Earth compared with male counterparts. The point is that we don't have enough women astronauts to get the data that we will need if women are in fact to be part of space exploration. The gender ratio remains pretty skewed. Of NASA's 44 active astronauts, just 14 are women. And of the 5 astronauts currently aboard the International Space Station, only one, Peggy Whitson, is a woman. And this is despite the fact that more women than ever are applying to become astronauts. So the question remains, why aren't they? To date, not a single woman astronaut has traveled beyond low Earth orbit. And that's ridiculous and surreal. Also, if you guys think that you're going to go out to Alpha Centauri and beyond without girls, that's not only crazy thinking and surreal thinking, it's magical thinking, and it's doomed. Time for another short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be back directly with a woman whose story will make you furious and delighted and happy and hopeful all at the same time. Coming right up.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. Judaline Cassidy. Wow, what a woman. She has been a proud member of Plumbers Local Number 1 in New York City for the past 20 years. She was one of the very first women accepted into Plumbers Local 371 of Staten Island, and the first woman elected to the examining board of Plumbers Local Number 1. But that is only a small part of this story. Listen in. Judaline, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Robin.
You, when I encountered you at this remarkable panel in New York City on women in the trades, and you were there talking about the passion you had for plumbing, and you were just so damn dynamic and incredible. I fell in love with you on the spot, and of course I accosted you afterwards. I stalked you through the crowd and asked if you could come on this program, and here you are. Tell the extraordinary, amazing story of Judaline Cassidy and plumbing.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. The way I started being a plumber. I grew up in the beautiful islands of Trinidad and Tobago. Mm-hmm. And I grew up with my great-great-great-grandmother, actually.
Wow.
And in Trinidad and Tobago has the British system of education, so we have primary school and secondary school. So after secondary school, I wanted to be a lawyer, but as my grandmother passed away,
universities wasn't free. You have to pay, so I couldn't afford to do that. So the next best thing was attending a trade education.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a choice of plumbing or electrical. I said to myself, plumber, here I come. Because it was easy for me, being wet or getting shot. So I choose plumbing.
I'd make exactly the same decision, I must say. Yes. Yeah. But what was there resistance once you actually tried to put it into practice? I mean, at least.
Yes, sorry to cut you. There was some resistance because back then I was like 110 pounds soaking wet, and I'm actually only 4 feet 11 and 7/8. So that was when the instructor saw me, he said, "You sure you can do this?" And I actually picked up cast iron pipe that was in the room to show him that I can lift the stuff because I was actually working out in the gym. Mm-hmm. I knew I was going to get some resistance, so I was working out in the gym. So I attended the John Donaldson Technical Institute. That was what it was called back then in Trinidad. And I did that for like a year, and then I left and I got married and I came to America. But I didn't get a job as a plumber right away. I did other things like most people years ago came from other countries come to America. We have all these other different types of jobs. So I was a babysitter, a nanny, a housekeeper, a personal shopper. So I did all of that before I had an opportunity to get into the union. My neighbor was part of the coalition. Black people 20 years ago used to go on construction site and demand work because they won't let into the unions as their white counterparts. So they formed these black coalitions and Latinas, and they would go on construction site and demand jobs. And my neighbor did that on one of the jobs and told them he had a plumber and sent me to the job. Now I didn't know that they didn't know I was a woman. Come in, I thought they knew.
Oh my God.
So yeah, that was fun. So I pull up in my Jeep, and in my Jeep, my seat is jacked up. And being also, the button is all the way up, I also have a seat cushion.
Uh-huh.
So I look really tall. So now it's time to exit the vehicle, and I open the door, and I come out, and I could see the laughter started because now they see that 4 foot 11 foot frame of me, 110 pounds, walking down into the dirt, into the construction pit of the work. When it's now starting, it's called the underground, where all the piping is done, so it goes to the sewer. So I walk down, and they laughing, like literally laughing in my face. Yeah. And the foreman said to me, "Get the F out of here. There's no way this girl knows plumbing." But I stayed, and I said, "Give me a shot, and if I don't work out, send me home." So I busted my ass, and they probably thought I wasn't going to come back, but I showed up every single day after that.
And the union itself, I mean, you've talked about the racist barring of black people from the union. If there's anything, the plumbers union, at least as I was growing up, was known as one of the most tightest white male bastions that kept out anybody who was not white and male. So you came in with a double whammy against you, and what was the reaction even in the union to your being a woman?
Oh, that was the worst one. That was, at least the guys laughed at me, and I was able to stay there and prove myself. So
you mean the guys? You mean the guys on the job?
On the construction site. So
right.
This is how I first started. I started non-union first. So that's how I got into that job. Now, after working for that particular company who let me get into the coalition, they kept me. And they usually will start somebody as non-union, and if they saw they had the initiative and they drive, they would send them down to the union hall to get into the union. So they sent about 5 of us, and I was the only girl, and they accepted all the guys. And the instructor at that time, he looked at my face and he says, "Get the F out of here. You better go home and do dishes. You must be kidding me." And I didn't get into the union. I went into my car and I literally cried. I didn't cry in front of him, but I cried. I didn't get in. All the guys got in, but I didn't get in because I was a woman and I was black, so that wasn't happening. That was in Staten Island. I got into the union through Plumbers Local Union 371 in Staten Island. But that wasn't the end of the story, because I continued going to work, and I worked really hard. And this is the importance of mentorship and somebody stepping up and being a hero to somebody that they don't even know.
Yes.
So one of the guys, this guy, Brian Tatora, he was a plumber for a long time. He's working beside me, and he said, "You're a really good worker. I have to try to get you into the union." And he spoke to somebody who spoke to somebody who spoke to somebody.
Mm-hmm. That's how it happens. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it was back then. And I got into the union. But the remarkable thing is the person who didn't let me in, and that's why I want women and people to understand, you can't let one person's no deter you, because that person who told me no and laughed in my face, he became one of my best advocates. He became my champion. He would tell everybody, "This is one of the best plumbers I know."
Uh-huh.
So yes, that's how life is. Like, sometimes you have to force people to recognize that you are here and you will not be removed.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's hard, but it's not easy when it's happening. But sometimes you have to study the course.
Well, all of that is absolutely true, but also one of the remarkable things about you is that you, you immediately upward mobilized. How shall I say it? Because once you were a qualified and union member, it changed your life. At the panel, you spoke of the passion you had for plumbing and how, nothing happens without water, and how the hell does the water get to you? Do people think of that when they turn on their faucets?
No, they don't.
Of course not. And you've turned your success around to help other women immediately. And talk about the nonprofit Tools and Tiaras. I love the name that you established for mentoring.
Also, yeah. So even before Tools and Tiaras, I was actually unofficially always mentoring the young women coming up behind me who wanted a way to survive. I did a speech at the Makers Conference, and I've always wanted to do the nonprofit, but I kept on pushing it back because I knew it's a lot of work, and it is a lot of work. So I didn't want to do it. So I was, unofficially doing it, sponsoring sisters, paying their dues, paying their rent, buying their kids Christmas gifts, whatever I had to do to take them to the next level. So at the Makers Conference, I gave a speech, and in the speech I said, I wanted to give girls a tool and a tiara because it gives a girl confidence, independence, and most of all, power. And the minute I said those words, the universe says, you have to do this nonprofit. And that's the name. And that was the name. And that's exactly how it started.
Well, clearly we're not afraid of the work because you've never not hard worked. It's just that this was boring work. This had to do with papers and filing papers and, getting a damn tax-free status and getting nonprofit and all boring. It's not like making the waters flow. I know
it's so amazing that you actually know me with the minute you met me, because that's what I'm struggling with. So everybody who knows me knows, they're laughing that that part of it I don't really like, but the part where I have the workshop and I teach women and girls the trade. That gets me on fire.
That's thrilling. That's absolutely thrilling. Yeah. Talk about that too, Judaline. Talk about the passion for plumbing, and because the other night at the panel you talked about the right of every woman to follow her passion, in a sense, to do work that's not work that you don't love, which is what most people on the planet have to do. That's labor, but work that you love is such a gift, such a thrill, such a joy, and a daily joy. And you talked about that, and I was sitting there with tears rolling down my cheeks and a huge grin on my face, as you remember. So talk about that.
I really, as I said, I wanted to be a lawyer, and that was the thing I envisioned for myself. But once I started doing plumbing, the passion that it ignited in me especially being a person that I'm dyslexic, so I see things differently with solving puzzles and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that plumbing had that, it got me so excited. And every day I get to solve a puzzle that gives somebody water and protects the health of the nation. And what most people don't understand, because the media and all the images that gets me really angry, is that they show tradespeople as not smart or not intelligent,
yes,
and the baffling idiot and the what. But you have to be one of the smartest people to solve these puzzles and protect people. Because if I don't put the water lines correctly, I can infect a whole community.
Look at Flint, Michigan.
Yes, exactly. For me, I still wake up every single day excited to go do plumbing. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying it's for everybody, and my back hurts and my knees hurt and I have arthritis, but I still love doing it. I love the fact that I get to provide awesome buildings and for people in New York City. I walk by every day, these buildings, and I know that I have left a mark in the UN. I did. So when people use the bathrooms in the UN and the hot water heater, I did that. So that brings me great joy. And I have a passion. I love to teach people. So when I have apprentices, I don't hold back my gift, because I believe we need to pass it on to other generations. And I want more people to become tradespeople, because our country is falling apart because we don't have trades, people joining the trades, because people make them believe that this is not a skill, not something you want to do.
Yes.
When actually being part of a union, you make a good salary, you have a 401k benefit, you have a pension plan, you have one of the best healthcare is through union healthcare. And you can become all of these things, and in New York City, make over $100,000 a year without college debt. But not a lot of people know that this opportunity, especially women.
Yes.
Women, I would say, don't know this opportunity exists, because we're not going into the high schools. We're not meeting girls where they're at. We're not meeting women where they're at and letting them know, like, this exists. The biggest thing that's happening to me since I did Tools and Tiaras, women message me all the time saying, I wish something like this had exists, because I wanted to be a mechanic. I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to be an electrician. Grown women that have, like, the jobs that I would tell you, like in finance. They reach out to me like this is something they wanted to do, but nobody told them existed, or if they wanted to do it, it was pushed that this was not feminine. You're not going to make it.
That's right.
I want to remove these barriers, and I don't want to be the exception anymore. I don't want to go somewhere in the room and people are like, oh my gosh, you're a plumber. I want to be the norm for girls everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's so it's normal.
Yeah.
When you hear the word plumber and it's a woman, it's normal. It's easy to find me. My name is Judaline6 on Twitter, Judaline6 on Instagram, and on Facebook, I'm Judaline Cassidy. Just who I am. It's JUDALINE.
And particularly in the future, as water becomes the most primary issue in the next 30 or 40 years on the planet, we need women in there controlling those pipes, by God. And I just think you are an absolute treasure of wisdom and dignity and feminism and pure, clean, potable water.
Yes.
Thank you.
And likewise, you. Thank you so much for having me. And every little girl anywhere, you can be anything you want to be, because you are special.
We have to take one more break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I will be back in just a moment with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back to some fighting words. If this week's commentary sounds disjointed, blame the pace of news. I'd originally planned to make this week's fighting words about the Boy Scouts, who, having lost applicants in startling numbers, made, in effect, a hostile takeover in absorbing the Girl Scouts. The good news being that older Girl Scouts can now become Eagle Scouts, but the bad news being, well, everything else, including lots of losses. Independence, the experience of bonding with other girls, and the full laser beam attention on them as girls in the way only a single-sex education in a gender-unbalanced society can provide to those discriminated against. Then the Scouts got swept aside, since I was going to discuss how deplorably often our politics now returns to penile metaphors, what with Senator Corker saying Trump had castrated Secretary of State Tillerson, when the word undermine would have been quite sufficient, and then Tillerson's replying that he had checked and found himself intact. It reminded me of the campaign when Republican candidates were busy comparing hand size as indicators of the size of their relative you-know-whats. At the time, I thought, we can sink no lower. Ah, the innocence of those days. Then your emails convinced me that I should address the painful controversy caused by the Women's March organizers having miscommunicated an intention to have Bernie Sanders open their Detroit convention this month. But fortunately they backed away from that and apologized, and he is merely appearing on a unity panel. That's fine. But then that story got pushed out of the center ring of the circus by the Senate testimony of the malevolent elf, Jeff Sessions, returning to lie indignantly once again. And then Trump, master of distraction, his only real skill, did it again to deflect attention away from public questioning of what our troops were doing in Niger in the first place. He refocused attention on himself, always his first and last resort anyway, and decided, what the hell, why not insult the families of dead soldiers again into the bargain? I need and want to address this, but I'm on delicate ground here. I agree with Virginia Woolf, who wrote, "As a woman I have no country. As a woman I need no country. As a woman my country is the whole world." I've spent much of my life trying to further the process by which humanity could evolve beyond war-making, that ritual between powerful, wealthy, older males in which powerless, younger, poorer males get sacrificed, while women and children plead, suffer, bury the dead, try to flee, and die. These days, women and children are also warriors, and this is considered progress. Maybe the presence of more women in the armed services will eventually civilize some of the worst aspects of militarization. Maybe not. I will defend women's right to be anywhere they wish to be. But no, I don't want them on that wall. I don't want anyone, male or female, on that wall. Yet perhaps Aaron Sorkin was right. Perhaps I need them on that wall, and perhaps I'm a hypocrite to think otherwise. Certainly the new concept in international law, the duty to protect, does make sense of military interventions to stop genocides. But it seems to me, at least, that so far in human history, just as the family has been made to serve as the ideal hierarchical foundation for patriarchy, so has war functioned as the perfected articulation of patriarchy, defining manliness as the capacity to dominate and murder best. To sustain that definition's power requires the myth of the hero, which in turn necessitates an extreme hypocrisy. Flags, parades, anthems, ceremonies, wreaths, medals, gold stars, and the other patriotic symbols that nonetheless ring hollow through the 4 a.m. silence of a widow's grief, or the agony of a mother who has lost her grown child. I also know that our so-called volunteer army in practice actually relies on a poverty draft and an education draft, in that it's disproportionately made up of young Americans of color and those from lower income backgrounds who enlist for the education and other benefits they couldn't get otherwise. The Department of Defense of this capitalist country is the largest socialist organization on the planet. Yet all that being said, I also know that there are some, perhaps many, who enlist out of a love of country and a real desire to defend values they cherish, and I can't help but respect that. The irony is that Trump's regime and his followers don't. They can't even muster that hollow hypocrisy of ritual because of their even greater hypocrisy, which is more obsessed with labeling football players as unpatriotic, more obsessed with flags and anthems, abstract symbols of patriotism, than with concern for the real thing, for those who literally gave their lives for it. That Trump cannot manage the minimal courtesy of this ritual by now should come as no surprise. His madness intensifies as he feels the net beginning to draw closer around him. So for once, let's ignore him. The families beg us to focus on loss of their individual, cherished relatives. But for me, the story lies not only with the fallen, but with those left alive who loved them. The pregnant young widow keening over her husband's closed casket. Who's going to check back on her life in a year, 5, 15? For me, the story lies with the mother of another soldier killed last May without even the courtesy of a presidential phone call or note. A mother who said she didn't care about a call or a letter or the lack thereof unless it would bring back her son. We, she said through the dignity of her tears, are the collateral damage. We are the ones left behind. Her words sliced through all the layers and masks of hypocrisy and named the face of war. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter and be sure to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and at iTunes, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. And you can check out my website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.